Good afternoon. My name is Joshua Caldwell, and today I'll be giving my presentation project analysis on the Apple iPhone. Apple Incorporated is a multinational technology that has been the forefront of innovation in consumer electronics for decades. Apple is known for their products such as the iPhone, the iPad, the Apple Watch, as well as the Mac computers. Over the last 5 years, Apple's has arisen and deliberately been slowing down the performance of older iPhones through software updates. This practice is often referred to as planned obsolescence, which has also led to a widespread of dissatisfaction among customers. The controversy sparked debate about consumer rights as well as product lifespan and corporate responsibility. To give a background about Apple, Apple was founded on April 1st, 1976 by Steve Jobs, I'm sure who you're familiar with, Steve Wozniak, as well as Ronald Wayne. Apple's initial focus was in the business of creating computers. With the release of the Apple II and the Macintosh in 1977, Apple began gaining popularity. In 2007, Apple made a groundbreaking move with the launch of the iPhone, which redefined the smartphone industry. The iPhone combined a mobile phone with an iPad as well as an internet communicator all into one handheld device. As far as Apple in 2024 today, the company remains one of the world's most valuable companies with a market capitalization of over $2 trillion. Tim Cook is also the current CEO of Apple today. The industry that Apple works in is the software and technology industry. Their main focus is manufacturing as well as marketing consumer electronics. Apple's known, of course, like I mentioned earlier, for their products such as the iPhone, the iPad, the Mac, as well as the Apple Watch. Now, Apple also has a very growing services division that operates in the technology industry as well. This includes their apps such as the Apple Store, the Apple Music, the iCloud, Apple TV, the Apple Arcade, as well as iTunes. I personally use Apple Music and Apple TV every day. Despite their success, Apple does operate in a highly competitive environment and faces many challenges as far as technology. This includes international trade dynamics, economic uncertainty, as well as government relations for their technology that they have. The research questions that I'll be doing today for my project analysis is how iPhone sales impacted the revenue of Apple over the last 5 years. How has the accusation of them slowing down their iPhones affected their revenue, whether negative or positive? What can Apple do to change their approach in the technology industry so that they don't get any more accusations of this planned obsolescence? Also, what can Apple do to increase revenue for products and services other than the iPhone? Now, doing a SWOT analysis of Apple, Apple has many strengths. Some of those strengths include their brand loyalty, innovation, their strong financial presence, as well as their global presence. Some of their weaknesses include their premium pricing strategy because iPhones are extremely expensive, their dependence and reliance on iPhone sales, as well as their reliance on their supply chain. Some of their opportunities in the technology industry include emerging markets, as well as their services growth, like I mentioned earlier, such as iCloud, iTunes, and Apple Music, as well as their wearable accessories, such as the Apple Watch. Some threats that Apple may face in the technology industry include intense competition, regulatory risks, rapid technological change, as well as economic uncertainty when dealing with different countries. Some external factors that Apple face are after doing an external factor analysis, some opportunities that Apple faces are global expansion, product diversification, as well as their services growth and their wearable technology. When it comes to global expansion, it's always a great opportunity for companies to expand into emerging markets that may be a good target for their products and services. Markets for Apple, this could include Asia as well as China too. Apple also has many opportunities as far as their service growth, as I mentioned earlier as well. Services such as Apple TV, Apple Arcade, and Apple Pay can provide recurring revenue streams for the company in the future. Some threats that they may face are regulatory changes, supply chain distribution, as well as market saturation because cell phones are now becoming a big thing. Everybody has one at this point. After doing an internal factor analysis of Apple, it is said that many of their strengths include their brand reputation, their innovative products, as well as their strong financial performance. Apple has had a very strong financial performance that is extremely recognizable. They've been in the news multiple times for being a $1 trillion company and for passing that market capitalization a few years ago. As far as the last 5 years, their revenue in terms of billions of dollars include $383 billion, $394 billion, $365 billion, $383 billion, as well as $394 billion. Some weaknesses that Apple may have internally are their high product prices, as well as their supply chain complexity and their limited customization of their products. The societal issues as well as the business concern that I have discovered through my extensive research is that Apple has used the method of slowing down their devices to increase revenue and profit of newer device models that they release. Apple's decision to slow down these older iPhones has ignited a firestorm of controversy and backlash that throughout its customer base has created issues for the company. In an article that I read by Emily DeLetter, she stated that Apple agreed to pay up to $500 million in settlement for slowed down phones over the last few years. Between the years of 2017 and 2018, there were over 66 class action lawsuits filed against Apple alleging that this was an issue, also stating that Apple was deliberately slowing down battery performance with older iPhones using the iOS updates. This backlash against Apple has undoubtedly had an impact on its business as well as their sales. Many customers choose to keep their older iPhones for longer periods of time, knowing that Apple is going to slow them down just to get them to continue to buy their newest product. After doing a financial analysis of Apple, it is shown that Apple has proven time and time again to be a very extraordinary company financially. They average $325 billion in revenue over the last 5 years, and Apple generated $383 billion just within the last year. Over 52% of that revenue is coming from their iPhone sales as well. Now, as far as their quarterly revenue, Apple typically does well in the fourth quarter of the year, which of course would make sense because Apple releases every new iPhone in September of the year. That way, during the holiday season, during the Christmas break, it influences everyone to buy the new iPhone, whether as a Christmas present or whatsoever. Now, during that time, Apple has averaged $112 billion in revenue during the fourth quarter of the year, which is a very large percentage of their overall revenue for the entire year. Now, some additional sources of revenue, of course, are their Apple AirPods sales, their Mac sales, as well as their Apple Watch sales. Now, as far as their AirPods sales have peaked back in 2020, with the corporation selling over 114 million units of AirPods. Since then, they've sold an annual amount of 82 million AirPods every year. Now, the Apple Watch generates on average $20 billion every year for them. Now, these are just some charts and graphs that I had created based on the information that I received from different websites and peer review sources that I have found. This right here is an overall map of the AirPods revenue in comparison to the iPhone, the Mac, and the iPad. Now, with this blue line that you see right here, it is very obvious that the iPhone is majority of the revenue for Apple over time, over the last 5 years. Now, when we look at Apple and how they've slowed down iPhones, we want to take a look at how that has affected their revenue going forward. Now, since then, what I found that Apple has actually had to pay out of pocket is in 2020, they've had to pay between $300 and $500 million as part of a settlement due to a class action lawsuit that was filed against them. They've not only had to pay that $300 million, but they've also had to pay customers up until this point that were for Verizon over $100 as a claim from the lawsuit if they had the devices that fit the description during that time that Apple was slowing down iPhones. When looking at this in comparison to their revenue over the last 5 years, the only year that Apple seems to be really affected by this change was in 2020 when they had their lowest amount of revenue at $276 million. Since then, their revenue did jump over 33% from $274 million all the way to 274 billion to $365 billion. In 2021, iPhone sales alone had jumped 40% from $137 billion in revenue to $192 billion the following year. This shows that Apple, though they were faced with a lot of lawsuits and a lot of hardships during that 2020 time period, they've still managed to bring their customers back in and reel them in. I believe it was with the release of the iPhone 13 that they had stated that they were going to be more transparent about battery percentages as well as adding new features that allow customers to see the lifespan of their phone and how much longer they have at basically maximum capabilities with their cell phone. Now, some business plans and recommendations that I have for Apple is to regain customer trust as well as provide transparent communication to all of their customers about their devices. Apple should be upfront with their customers about any performance management features that may be implemented in their new devices, and they should also provide clear expectations about the software updates and user agreements, as well as how their performance of their iPhone may be affected over time. Now, as far as bringing in new revenue for the company, I know that the iPhone accounts right now for over 50% of the revenue for the entire company. So in order to bring in more revenue, they need to diversify their products. An example of this would be Apple tapping into augmented reality as well as virtual reality. This could include creating a virtual reality headset. I know that other companies such as Samsung have came out with a virtual reality headset that allows the customers to have a almost real life experience of what it's like to be in virtual reality. This is a product that I believe Apple is more than capable of creating and coming out with a version of their own. Now, another thing that Apple can do in order to increase revenue is by focusing on their streaming platforms such as Apple Music, Apple TV, iCloud storage, and Apple News. Platforms such as these are a great way for them to build revenue. Like I said earlier in the presentation, myself included, I use Apple Music every single day as well as Apple TV. In conclusion, it is known that Apple has become one of the most dominant forces in the smartphone industry, which has allowed them to become a corporation with over $1 trillion market capitalization. With the exponential growth of services like the iCloud as well as the App Store, this allows them to be a multifaceted technology powerhouse. Though they built such a great empire over the last 5 years, they have had to revisit some older issues to further ensure their customers that they are getting full functionality from the products that they purchase. Apple's faced many lawsuits due to miscommunication regarding their device function and as a result have had to pay millions in reparations. This can be avoided in the future by Apple being transparent about devices as well as the overall health, as well as offer current device holders a discounted price on the next item that they buy or the next cell phone that comes out. This concludes my presentation on the Apple iPhone and how their slowing down of the iPhones has affected their sales and revenue over the last 5 years. My name is Joshua Caldwell. Thank you again for watching my presentation.